Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he checked his pulse rifle for the third time that morning. The metal deck of the Terran Defense Force cruiser Valiant Dawn hummed beneath his boots as the ship moved through space. He had been a soldier for 8 years now, and this patrol felt different somehow. The hair on the back of his neck stood up like it did before every major fight. His squad was running combat drills in the lower cargo bay when the alarms started screaming. Red lights flashed everywhere and the ship shook hard enough to knock 2 of his men off their feet. Jake grabbed the nearest wall panel and activated his comm unit. "Control, this is Morrison. What's our situation?" he called out over the noise. The voice that came back was tight with fear. "Multiple contacts decloaking off our starboard side. Unknown vessel types. All hands to battle stations." Jake looked at his 5 squad members and saw his own worry reflected in their faces. They had been fighting the Zephyrian Empire for 2 years now, but nobody had ever seen their ships decloak this close to a human vessel. The aliens were smart, and they never took unnecessary risks. "Lock and load, Marines," Jake ordered. "Looks like we're about to earn our pay." The ship shuddered again, and Jake heard the distinctive whine of energy weapons hitting their shields. Through the small porthole in the cargo bay wall, he could see strange ships that looked like they were made of crystalline light. They moved, in perfect formation like a school of fish, firing beams of blue energy that made the space around them shimmer. Private Danny Carter, the youngest member of Jake's squad, was checking his equipment with shaking hands. "Sarge, I heard these aliens can read minds. Is that true?" "Don't believe everything you hear, kid," Jake replied, though he had heard the same stories. The Zephyrians were tall and thin with skin that looked like colored glass. Intelligence reports said they could speak directly into your head and make you see things that weren't there. Jake hoped those reports were wrong. The ship's captain came over the intercom system. "All personnel, we are being boarded. Repeat, we are being boarded. Defend your positions and protect the civilians in sectors 7 through 12. Jake's squad was already moving before the captain finished speaking. They knew the ship's layout better than their own homes, and Jake led them through the maze of corridors toward the civilian quarters. The Valiant Dawn carried over 300 non-military personnel, including families of crew members and diplomatic staff. As they ran through the ship, Jake could hear fighting in the distance. The sound of human weapons was different from the alien energy beams, and he could tell his people were giving as good as they got. The corridor lights flickered as power systems struggled to keep up with the damage. They reached Section 7 just as a hole appeared in the outer wall. The emergency barriers slammed down, but not before Jake saw his first Zephyrian warrior. The alien was nearly 7 feet tall and moved like it was floating rather than walking. Its skin was pale blue and seemed to glow from within. When it turned its head toward Jake, he felt something trying to push into his mind like cold fingers. "Don't look directly at them," Jake shouted to his men. "Keep your eyes on your weapons and trust your training." The fight that followed was unlike anything Jake had experienced. The Zephyrians moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. Their energy weapons could cut through the ship's metal walls like paper, but they seemed surprised by how hard the humans fought back. Jake's squad managed to hold their position for almost an hour. They evacuated 200 civilians to the emergency pods before the aliens brought in reinforcements. Jake was covering the retreat of the last group of children when something hit him in the back. The energy beam felt like being struck by lightning and kicked by a horse at the same time. Jake fell forward and his vision went dark around the edges. The last thing he saw was one of the alien warriors standing over him. Its large black eyes seemed to be studying him like he was some kind of interesting insect. When Jake woke up, he was lying on a metal table in a room he didn't recognize. The walls were made of the same crystal material as the alien ships, and they pulsed with soft light. Strange symbols floated in the air around him, and he could hear a low humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. His armor was gone, and he was wearing a simple gray uniform that felt rough against his skin. Metal bands were wrapped around his wrists and ankles, connected to the table by thin cables. When he tried to sit up, the bands tightened and held him in place. Door opened in the wall that Jake hadn't even seen was there. 3 Zephyrians entered the room, and Jake got his first close look at his captors. They were even stranger up close than they had been during the fight. Their skin really did look like colored glass, and he could see veins of light running through it like electricity. They had no hair, and their faces were longer and thinner than human faces. The one in the middle stepped closer to the table, and Jake felt that cold, pushing sensation in his mind again. This time, it was stronger, and he could almost hear words forming in his head. "Human soldier," the voice said without moving its mouth. "You fight well for such a primitive species. We are curious about your kind." Jake tried to speak, but found his throat was too dry. The alien seemed to understand anyway. "You will help us learn," the voice continued. "Your people interest us. Most species surrender when they realize they cannot win. Humans seem to fight harder when they are losing. We wish to understand why." The other 2 aliens were doing something with devices that looked like metal wands. They pointed them at Jake, and lights flashed. He could feel something scanning his body from head to toe. "Where are my men?" Jake finally managed to ask. The alien tilted its head like a bird. "Some died fighting. Others are being studied like you. The ones who survived the boarding will serve the Empire in other ways." Jake closed his eyes and tried not to think about what that might mean. He had failed his squad and his ship. The civilians he had tried to protect were probably dead or worse. All he could do now was try to stay alive long enough to find a way to escape. The aliens finished their scans and left without another word. Jake was alone in the crystal room with only the humming sound for company. He tested the restraints again, but they held him firmly. Whatever these beings wanted from him, he wasn't going to make it easy for them. Jake had no idea how long he had been unconscious when the restraints finally released him. His body ached all over, and his head felt like someone had been hitting it with a hammer. The crystal room was exactly the same as when he had closed his eyes, but something felt different about the humming sound in the walls. 2 different aliens entered the room. These ones wore dark robes and carried weapons that looked like staffs made of twisted metal. They gestured for Jake to stand and follow them. When he tried to ask where they were going, one of them made a sound like static electricity, and Jake felt his voice stop working. They walked through corridors that seemed to change shape as they moved. The walls flowed like water, and new passages opened up while old ones closed behind them. Jake tried to memorize the route, but it was impossible when nothing stayed the same for more than a few seconds. Eventually, they reached a massive chamber that took Jake's breath away. The ceiling was so high he couldn't see the top, and the walls curved away into the distance. In the center was a circular platform surrounded by what looked like floating crystal formations. Thousands of aliens filled seats that hung in the air, at different levels around the space. "Welcome to the Grand Amphitheater," one of his guards said directly into his mind. "You will fight here for the entertainment of our people. If you survive long enough, you may earn the right to serve the Empire in other ways." Jake was pushed onto the central platform, and the guards flew away on platforms that appeared out of nowhere. The crowd of aliens made sounds like wind chimes ringing in a storm. He supposed that was their version of cheering. Above the arena, a section of the air shimmered and became solid. A figure appeared there that made all the other aliens look small and weak. She was taller than the others, and her skin was deep purple like an amethyst stone. Her eyes were larger and seemed to glow with their own light. When she looked down at Jake, he felt like she was seeing right through him to his bones. "I am Queen. Lyra lay." Her voice filled his head with the force of a thunderclap. "I have ruled this empire for 1,000 of your years. I have conquered 17 star systems and collected the finest warriors from each as prizes. You are the first human to stand in my arena." The crowd went silent, and Jake could feel their attention focused on him like the heat from a fire. He looked around the platform and saw dark stains on the metal that he was pretty sure were dried blood. "What am I supposed to fight?" Jake called, out, hoping his voice would carry in the huge space. Queen Lyra lay made a sound that might have been laughter. "You will see soon enough, human. Try not to disappoint me. I am very curious about your species." A section of the platform opened up, and something climbed out that made Jake's stomach turn. It looked like a giant spider crossed with a scorpion, with 6 arms that ended in claws the size of swords. Its skin was covered in scales that shifted color as it moved. When it opened its mouth, Jake could see 3 rows of teeth and a tongue that dripped acid onto the platform. The creature was called a Korthak, and Jake could tell from the scars covering its body that it had fought many battles in this arena. It moved in a circle around him, testing his reactions and looking for weaknesses. Jake had no weapons and no armor, just his training and whatever he could figure out from watching his opponent. The Korthak attacked without warning, all 6 arms, moving at once in a pattern too fast for Jake to follow. He threw himself to the side and felt claws tear through the air where his head had been. The creature's momentum carried it past him, and Jake managed to land a kick on one of its legs as it went by. The kick hurt Jake's foot more than it seemed to hurt the creature, but it gave him some information. The Korthak was fast, but it was also heavy and took time to change direction. If he could stay mobile and avoid getting cornered, he might have a chance. For the next 10 minutes, Jake ran and dodged while the creature tried to catch him. Every time it got close, he would dive or roll away and try to land a hit on what looked like vulnerable spots. The crowd was making more noise now, and Jake thought some of them were actually cheering for him. The turning point came when the Korthak got frustrated and tried to jump on him from above. Jake waited until the last second, and then rolled toward the creature instead of away from it. The move caught it completely off guard, and it crashed into the platform hard enough to crack the metal. While it was stunned, Jake grabbed one of its middle arms and used his whole body weight to twist it in a direction it wasn't supposed to bend. The creature made a sound like breaking glass, and Jake felt bones snap under his grip. It tried to grab him with its other arms, but the pain made it clumsy. Jake kept moving, staying close to the injured creature where its remaining arms couldn't get a good angle on him. He found a piece of broken metal from the platform and used it to cut at the tendons in the Korthak's legs. It was brutal work, but Jake had learned a long time ago that survival wasn't pretty. When the creature finally fell and stopped moving, Jake was covered in its blood and his own. He had cuts all over his arms and legs, and he was pretty sure at least 2 of his ribs were cracked. But he was alive, and the thing that had been trying to kill him wasn't. The crowd was going crazy now, making sounds like a hurricane mixed with breaking glass. Queen Lyrelay was staring down at him with those glowing eyes, and Jake could feel her thoughts pressing against his mind like a weight. Interesting, her voice whispered in his head. Most warriors who face a Korthak for the first time do not survive. You show promise, human. Guards appeared on the platform, and Jake didn't resist when they led him away. He was too tired to fight, and he needed time to think about what had just happened. During the battle, there had been moments when his body seemed to know what to do before his mind caught up. His reflexes had been faster than he remembered them being, and his strength had felt different somehow. They took him to a cell that was bigger than the crystal room, but just as uncomfortable. There was a bed made of metal and a hole in the corner that he supposed was meant to be a bathroom. The walls were solid stone instead of crystal, and they didn't make the humming sound. Jake lay down on the metal bed and tried to inventory his injuries. Everything hurt, but nothing seemed to be permanently damaged. His cuts were already starting to close up, and the pain in his ribs was fading. He had always healed fast, but this seemed like more than that. As he drifted off to sleep, Jake wondered what they would make him fight next. He had survived one battle in the arena, but Queen Lyrelay had said she collected the finest warriors from 17 star systems. That meant there were probably 16 other types of creatures waiting for their turn to try to kill him. He also wondered about the other humans who had been captured from his ship. Were they in cells like this one? Or were they already dead? Jake made himself a promise that if he lived long enough to find out, he would do everything in his power to get them home. The last thing he remembered before sleep took him was the feeling of Queen Lyrelay's eyes watching him from somewhere in the darkness. Jake woke up to find 3 aliens in white robes standing around his bed. They had devices in their hands that looked like metal snakes, and they were pointing them at different parts of his body. Lights flashed, and Jake could feel something scanning. "Him from the inside out. Remarkable healing rate," one of them said in his mind. "The tissue damage from yesterday's combat has decreased by 60%. This is far beyond normal parameters for his species." The lead alien was different from the others Jake had seen. This one's skin was silver instead of blue or purple, and its eyes were smaller but seemed to glow brighter. When it looked at Jake, he felt like it was reading his thoughts. "I am Dr. Keshava," it said without moving its mouth. "I serve as chief xenobiologist to Queen Lyrelay. Her Majesty has ordered me to study you in detail. Your performance against the Korthak was unexpected." Jake sat up on the metal bed and tried to ignore the scanning devices. "What do you want?" "To know?" "Everything," Dr. Keshava replied. "Your species is new to us. Most races we encounter follow predictable patterns. They fight until they realize they cannot win. Then they surrender or flee. Humans seem to fight harder when the situation becomes hopeless. We wish to understand this behavior." The doctor gestured, and Jake felt a pressure in his head like someone was trying to push their way inside his skull. He gritted his teeth and pushed back as hard as he could. The pressure increased for a moment and then suddenly stopped. Dr. Keshava tilted its head and made a sound like clicking glass. "Fascinating. Most subjects cannot resist our mental probes at all. You have some natural defense against psychic intrusion." "Maybe I'm just stubborn," Jake said. "Perhaps, or perhaps there is something else." The doctor made notes on a device that floated in the air beside it. "We will learn the truth in time. For now, you must prepare for your next combat trial." They led Jake through more shifting corridors to a preparation chamber where he found weapons and armor laid out on a table. The armor was made of the same crystal material as the alien ships, but it fit his body perfectly. The weapons were unfamiliar designs, but he could figure out how to use them by touching them. Today you face something more dangerous than a Korthak, one of the guards told him. The Iron Fang has killed more arena fighters than any other champion. It has won 300 consecutive battles. Jake strapped on the armor and picked up what looked like a sword made of condensed light. The weapon felt warm in his hands and seemed to respond to his thoughts. When he swung it through the air, it left a trail of blue fire. They brought him back to the grand amphitheater, where the crowd was even larger than before. News of the human who had killed a Korthak on his first day had spread throughout the city. Queen Lyrale was in her floating platform again, watching Jake with those glowing purple eyes. "Human warrior," her voice filled the arena. "Today you face our greatest champion. The Iron Fang has served the Empire for 20 years and has never known defeat. If you survive this battle, you will have earned a place among the elite gladiators." The platform in the center of the arena opened, and something climbed out that made Jake's blood run cold. The Iron Fang had once been a living creature, but now it was more machine than organic. Half of its body was covered in metal plates, and its left arm had been replaced with a weapon that looked like a cannon. Its remaining eye glowed red and tracked Jake's movement with mechanical precision. This was a Vorthan, one of the cyborg species from the Outer Rim. Jake had heard stories about them from other soldiers, but had never seen one in person. They were already dangerous fighters, and the cybernetic enhancements made them nearly unstoppable. The Iron Fang didn't waste time circling or testing Jake's defenses. It charged straight at him with its cannon arm already powering up. Jake threw himself to the side as a beam of red energy burned a hole in the platform where he had been standing. The cyborg moved faster than the Korthak, and it was much smarter. It anticipated Jake's movements and cut off his escape routes. Its organic arm ended in claws that could tear through the crystal armor like paper, and its metal legs gave it incredible jumping ability. Jake tried to use the same tactics that had worked against the Korthak, but the Iron Fang adapted to everything he did. When he went for its legs, it jumped over him. When he tried to get behind it, it spun around faster than his eyes could follow. The light sword in his hands felt useless against the creature's metal plating. For 20 minutes, Jake ran and dodged while the Iron Fang systematically destroyed the arena around them. Pieces of the platform were scattered everywhere, and several of the floating seats had been knocked out of the air by stray energy blasts. Jake was getting tired, and he knew he couldn't keep this up much longer. The end came when Jake's foot slipped on a piece of broken metal. He fell backward, and the Iron Fang was on him instantly. Its claws raked across his chest, and Jake felt the crystal armor crack and fall away. Blood ran down his body and pooled on the platform beneath him. The cyborg raised its cannon arm for the killing shot, and Jake closed his eyes. He was out of tricks and out of time. This was how it was going to end. In an alien arena fighting for the entertainment of creatures who saw him as nothing more than an animal. But death didn't come. Instead, Jake felt something change deep inside his body. It started as a warmth in his chest and spread outward like fire in his veins. When he opened his eyes, everything looked different. The arena seemed brighter, and he could see details he had missed before. The Iron Fang's movements that had been too fast to follow were now clear and predictable. Jake rolled away from the energy blast and came to his feet in one smooth motion. His wounds were still bleeding, but the pain was gone. His muscles felt stronger, and his reflexes were sharper than they had ever been. When the Iron Fang charged at him again, Jake didn't run. He met the cyborg head-on and grabbed its cannon arm with both hands. The metal was hot enough to burn skin, but Jake held on anyway. With strength he didn't know he possessed, he twisted, the arm until the joints snapped and the weapon sparked and died. The Iron Fang tried to rake him with its claws, but Jake was moving too fast now. He ducked under the attack and drove his fist into the creature's chest with enough force to crack its metal plating. The cyborg stumbled backward, and Jake pressed his advantage. What happened next would be talked about in the arena for years to come. Jake grabbed the broken pieces of the platform and hurled them at the Iron Fang with impossible accuracy. Each piece hit exactly where he aimed, and the accumulated damage began to add up. The cyborg's movements became jerky and sparks flew from its damaged systems. The final blow came when Jake somehow got his hands around the Iron Fang's neck. The metal was thick and strong, but Jake squeezed anyway. His grip tightened beyond what any human should have been capable of, and the cyborg's head came apart in his hands. The arena fell completely silent. Even the wind chimes sound that the aliens made when they were excited had stopped. Jake stood in the center of the platform, covered in blood and holding the remains of their greatest champion, and felt the weight of thousands of stares. Queen Lyrale's voice broke the silence, but for the first time it sounded uncertain. Impossible! No organic being should be able to generate that level of physical force. Jake looked up at her floating platform and saw something in her glowing eyes that he had never seen before. The ancient alien queen who had conquered 17 star systems was afraid of him. Dr. Keshava appeared on the platform with several guards. They approached Jake carefully, like he was a dangerous animal that might attack at any moment. The doctor's scanning devices were going crazy, flashing lights and making sounds Jake had never heard before. "Your cellular structure has changed," Dr. Keshava said, and Jake could hear the wonder in its mental voice. "Your muscle density has increased by 40%. Your nervous system is operating at nearly twice its previous efficiency. How is this possible?" Jake didn't have an answer. He felt different, but he couldn't explain what had happened. All he knew was that when death had seemed certain, his body had found a way to survive. Queen Lyrale stared down at Jake from her floating platform with eyes that seemed to burn with purple fire. The silence in the arena stretched on until Jake could hear his own heartbeat echoing off the crystal walls. Finally, the alien queen spoke, and her voice carried a tone he hadn't heard before. "Remove the human from the arena immediately," she commanded. "He is too dangerous to remain with the other gladiators. Take him to the deep cells and prepare him for immediate termination." Jake felt the change in the air around him as dozens of guards moved to surround the platform. These weren't the same aliens who had escorted him before. These ones wore heavy armor and carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. They moved like soldiers who had seen real combat. But something was different about Jake now. He could see the patterns in their movement before they completed them. When the first guard raised his weapon, Jake was already moving. He grabbed a piece of debris from the destroyed platform and threw it with precision that surprised even him. The chunk of metal hit the guard's weapon and knocked it from his hands. The other guards opened fire, but Jake seemed to know where the energy beams would be before they were fired. He dodged and weaved between the blasts, moving closer to the edge of the platform. His enhanced reflexes made everything around him appear to move in slow motion. Jake reached the edge of the arena and didn't hesitate. He leaped into the crowd, seating area, and landed among a group of startled aliens. They scattered like frightened birds, and Jake kept moving, jumping from one floating platform to another. Behind him, he could hear Queen Lyrale screaming orders in a language that sounded like breaking glass. The city beyond the arena was a maze of crystal spires and floating structures connected by bridges of solid light. Jake had no idea where he was going, but he knew he had to get as far away from the amphitheater as possible. His enhanced senses picked up the sounds of pursuit echoing through the crystalline streets. He dropped down into the lower levels of the city where the buildings were made of metal and stone instead of crystal. Here, the light was dimmer, and the air smelled of machinery and exhaust. Jake realized this must be where the working-class aliens lived, away from the beautiful spires of the upper city. In a narrow alley between two large buildings, Jake finally stopped to catch his breath. His body was still changing, and he could feel new strength flowing through his muscles. The wounds from his fight with the Iron Fang had stopped bleeding and were already starting to heal. "Human, over here." The voice came from a doorway hidden in the shadows. Jake spun around, ready to fight, but stopped when he saw who had spoken. It was another human, a woman about his age with short black hair and intelligent brown eyes. She wore the same gray uniform that Jake had been given, but hers was dirty and patched in several places. When she stepped into the light, Jake could see old scars on her arms and face. "My name is Lisa Zhang," she said quietly. "I was captured from the transport ship Meridian 6 months ago. I've been working in the maintenance tunnels ever since, waiting for a chance to escape." Jake moved closer to her, keeping his voice low. "How many other humans are there?" "Maybe 20 that I know of," Lisa replied. "Most of them are in work camps outside the city. A few others are in the deep prisons. I heard about what you did in the arena today. The whole city is talking about it." She led him through the doorway into a tunnel that seemed to run underneath the buildings. The walls were rough stone, and the only light came from glowing crystals embedded in the ceiling. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, and Jake could hear the sound of machinery humming through the walls. "These tunnels connect the whole lower city," Lisa explained as they walked. "The Zephyrians use them to move supplies and waste. Most of them don't even know these passages exist. They walked for what felt like hours, moving deeper underground. Eventually, Lisa stopped at a section where several tunnels met and made a hand signal. Figures emerged from the shadows and Jake tensed, but Lisa put a hand on his arm. "It's okay," she said. "These are friends." The group that surrounded them was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. There were aliens from at least 6 different species, all of them bearing the scars and calluses of hard labor. A few looked like they had once been warriors, but their weapons and armor were long gone. One of them, a creature that looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird, stepped forward and spoke in accented but clear English. "I am Theclon of the Miralin Resistance. We have been waiting for someone like you, human warrior." "Someone like me?" Jake asked. "Someone who can resist their mental powers," Theclon replied. "The Zephyrians control their empire through psychic domination. Most species cannot fight back once they establish mental contact, but you are different. We saw what happened in the arena." Lisa nodded. "They've been trying to scan your mind for days, but they can't get through your defenses. That's never happened before." Theclon led them deeper into the tunnel system to a large cavern that had been converted into a meeting place. There were aliens here from dozens of different worlds, all of them refugees from Zephyrian conquest. Jake listened as they told him about the true nature of the Empire. "Queen Lirelai is not just a conqueror," Theclon explained. "She feeds on the life force of entire planets to maintain her immortality. Every world she takes becomes a little more dead, a little more empty. She has been doing this for over 1,000 years. An alien that looked like a walking tree spoke up. The psychic amplifiers in the crystal throne are what allow her to drain life from across the galaxy. If those could be destroyed, her power would be broken. But no one has ever gotten close to the throne, Lisa said. The entire structure is alive and responds to Queen Lyrelai's thoughts. It changes shape to keep intruders out and creates guardians to defend itself. Jake felt something stirring in his chest, the same warmth he had experienced during his fight with the Iron Fang. What would it take to reach the amplifiers? Theclon's large eyes fixed on Jake. Someone who could resist psychic control long, enough to get through the throne's defenses, someone who could adapt to whatever the structure threw at them. You're talking about a suicide mission, Lisa said, but Jake could see the hope in her eyes. Maybe, Jake replied. But if Queen Lyrelai is afraid of me, that means I have something she doesn't understand. Something that gives me an advantage. Over. The next few hours, the Resistance members shared everything they knew about the Crystal Throne and its defenses. Jake learned that the structure was more than just a building. It was a living organism that Queen Lyrelai had grown over centuries of psychic manipulation. It could reshape itself instantly and create weapons and barriers from its own substance. But Jake was beginning to understand what was happening to his body. The stress of combat and the threat of death were triggering changes in his cellular structure. His muscles were becoming denser, his reflexes faster, and his mind more resistant to outside influence. It was like his body was evolving in real time to meet whatever challenges it faced. There's something else, Lisa said as they prepared to leave the cavern. I've been monitoring the communication networks. There are human ships massing near. The border systems. The Terran Defense Force is planning something big. Theclon nodded. If we can weaken Queen Lyrelai's hold on the Empire from within, your people might have a chance to break through their defenses. Jake looked around at the faces of the Resistance fighters. They came from different worlds and different species, but they all shared the same look of desperate hope. They had been slaves and prisoners for years, watching their homeworlds die while Queen Lyrelai grew more powerful. When do we attack the Crystal Throne? Jake asked. Tomorrow night, Theclon replied. There will be a celebration to mark the anniversary of the Empire's founding. Queen Lyrelai will be in the throne chamber conducting the life drain ceremony. The security will be focused on protecting her, not on watching for intruders in the lower levels. Lisa handed Jake a small device that looked like a crystal pendant. This will help you navigate the throne's interior. It's tuned to the same frequency as the psychic amplifiers. When you get close, it will start to glow. Jake put the device around his neck and felt it pulse against his chest. Tomorrow he would attempt something that no one had ever tried before. He would walk into the heart of an alien empire and try to destroy a creature that had lived for 1,000 years. But first, he needed to understand what was happening to his own body. The changes were accelerating, and he could feel new abilities, developing every hour. Whatever the Zephyrians had awakened in him, it was something they had never encountered before. The Crystal Throne rose from the center of the alien city like a mountain of living light. Jake crouched in the shadows at the base of the massive structure and watched the celebration happening above. Thousands of Zephyrians floated around the upper levels of the throne, their bodies glowing as they participated in the life drain ceremony. Lisa was beside him, along with a dozen resistance fighters from different species. They had spent the day preparing for this moment, gathering weapons and studying the building's layout. But Jake knew that once he entered the throne, he would be on his own. The ceremony will last for 3 hours, Theclon whispered. Queen Lyrelai will be in a trance state, drawing power from the conquered worlds. That's when she'll be most vulnerable. Jake nodded and checked his weapons one last time. The Resistance had given him a blade forged from crystallized starlight and armor made from the shells of deep space creatures. But he knew his real weapons were the changes happening inside his body. Over the past day, the transformation had accelerated. His strength had doubled again, and his senses had become so sharp he could hear individual heartbeats in the crowd above. When he touched metal objects, he could sense the energy flowing through them. His body was adapting to every challenge it faced. "Remember," Lisa said, "the amplifiers are in the heart of the throne. You'll know them when you see them because they'll be the brightest things in the structure. Destroy those and Queen Lyralee's power over the galaxy will be broken." Jake squeezed her hand and then moved toward the base of the crystal throne. The structure's surface was smooth as glass, but his enhanced grip allowed him to find handholds where none should have existed. He began to climb, moving faster than any normal human could have managed. The throne sensed his presence almost immediately. The wall beneath his hands